Michael Bungay, Stanier here. Welcome to the Tools for the Time Crunch Manager webinar. You can see right above my head what we're talking about today, the 5 disciplines to asking a great question. So here I am, Michael Bungay, Stanier. You may know me as the author of Do More Great Work, sold a bunch of copies. I'm also the senior partner at Box of Crayons, where we help people and organizations do less good work and more great work. And quite frankly, asking good questions is part of the secret. Okay, now, if you'd like to be more connected immediately, because my radiant charisma, join our LinkedIn group, Tools for the Time Crunch Manager. Do a little search on LinkedIn, you'll find it. We'd love to have you a member there. That would be fantastic. Great community, great tools and resources shared constantly. And let's just get going. Let's get going on this great webinar. So let me start with a question. And you may have heard this before if you've attended my webinars before. How focused do you plan to be? 1 is low, 7 is high. Give yourself a score. 1 means completely distracted. I've got everything going. There's nothing that's going to have me pay attention to this webinar. 7, fully focused. I put gadgets away. I've closed doors. I've put headphones on. I've stuck up do not disturb signs. I'm really going to be present. And whatever your number, and I don't mind what it is, make sure you adjust your environment so you can squeeze the most out of this webinar. Now here's what I notice. When you ask a good question, one of 2 things happens. One is, it can open up an amazing world, right? This is actually the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul in Turkey. And you go through any number of small little stone archways and suddenly it explodes into this cacophony of sound and color and commerce. It's amazing. But sometimes you ask a question and really not so much. It's like hitting a blank wall or a bricked-in window. So what's the difference? Well, what I've found is an okay question that's well asked often can beat a great question that's poorly asked. So let's have a look at what the 5 disciplines are for asking a really great question. Discipline number 1, stop overcomplicating everything, because that's what's happening. It's about learning how to simplify. And I've got 3 practices that will help with that. The first is, stop with the long warm-up introduction, slowly meandering, getting to the point of asking the question. Just get there faster. Don't even have the introduction. Think of it like a James Bond movie where from the first moment you're just into the action straight away. So cut the introduction. Secondly, keep your questions to 5 words or less. That is really difficult, but it means that your questions arrive with real clarity, profundity, and simplicity. So do that. Third discipline here, or the third practice under this first discipline, is learning how to shut up. Ask a question, 1 question, and then be quiet. Don't talk a bit more and then add another question and then add another question and then just talk a little bit longer. That just leaves the other person who's on the receiving end of this overwhelmed by everything that's going on. All right, that's the first discipline. The second discipline is make sure you ask real questions, not fake questions. What's a fake question? Well, often, and you can see this is the first practice here, it's when you offer up advice and it sounds like, hey, have you thought of? That's not a question, that's advice with a question mark attached to it. It's completely different. The second practice here you need to stop is to stop mining. That's when you go, look, I've got an answer I want you to have. I'm going to ask you the question that will get you the answer. And then annoyingly, they don't get there. So you ask the question again because, they're a bit slow, obviously, but they still don't get there. And then you ask the question a third time, nothing. You've got to stop trying to chase it down to get the answer that you want. If you've got something you need to tell them, tell them. Don't try and trick them by asking them various questions. And the third practice here is using the phrase out of curiosity as a way of starting your questions. Sometimes you can ask a question and it kind of lands with a kind of heaviness and a, you better get this right or else. Using the phrase, so out of curiosity, means it arrives with a greater lightness and playfulness and accessibility for the person you're asking. All right, third discipline, stop the noise. It's so noisy when people are in conversations and you need to create more space, you need to create more silence. So the first practice here, a nod to Susan Cain and her book Quiet, which many of you will have read, all about the needs of introverts in an extroverted world. People need a bit of space and a time. Not everybody, but many people, to formulate the answer to the question. Don't stomp on them by continuing to talk. Secondly, as you sit there feeling uncomfortable because of the silence, know that the other person is also uncomfortable and they will crack first. And the third piece here is around, even as you hold the silence, Know that you can do that in a way that is friendly and encouraging. Smile, give good body language, create a warm, comfortable space, even as you hold the silence to give them space to come up with a great answer. All right, what's the fourth discipline? It's about upping your listening game. Look, I know lots of you have heard the stories and the practice of active listening, and here's why I've got a great bat, because that's really active listening. Here's what I'm thinking. Even if you know active listening, you've got to stop a few things. One is stop bobbleheading. You know, fake active listening, nodding your head, making small grunting noises of encouragement, all the meantime thinking of something completely different. You know, the wheel is spinning, but the hamster has left the building. Second thing to stop doing, stop thinking about the next question you need to ask them. You know, you ask the question and then you spend the whole time worrying about, I don't know what the next thing to say is, I better figure it out. You know what, it will come to you. Listen to what they say and the next question will be more or less obvious. And the third thing to say, and it's really not a practice so much as insight, which is when you ask a question, it can be like going caving or spelunking or potholing, wherever you are. It's about stepping into a darkness and into uncertainty, and you don't always know where you're going. But you can trust the light, the beam of your question will illuminate some of the way. But you need to have a degree of self-awareness that it's not always comfortable to ask a question and wait to see what happens. All right, what's the fifth and final discipline? Don't stop at one answer. And so often we do. We ask the question, they give an answer, you're like, fantastic. But the first answer is rarely the best answer, and it's rarely the only answer. So here are the 3 ways you do that. And the first 2 are about using the best question in the world, A.W.E, awesome, and it stands for and what else. You ask a question. One of my favorites is, what's the real challenge here for you? You nod your head, you create space, and they give you an answer, and you go, great, and what else? What else is a real challenge here for you? And you need to be genuinely curious, and you need to make it sound like you're bored, but you're still asking them. But asking, and what else? And what else? And then if you want to wrap it up, is there anything else? Is a great way to find out what's really there, so you can then focus on the thing that matters the most. So there we go, 5 disciplines of asking a really great question. I've got a few more questions for you before you go. The first is, what are the 2 critical takeaways for you from this webinar? Write them down for me. You know, if you don't, you'll forget it all. And write down one thing you're going to do differently as well. Insight should lead to action. So what are your insights and what's the action you're going to take? Write them down for me now. And now have a think about this. Who else needs to see this webinar? It's only 10 minutes or so, but who on your team, in your business unit, in your organization, in your life could benefit from knowing how to ask a question in a more powerful way? And if you can think of people, please pass them the link or the access or whatever so they can get to see this as well. You'll be doing everybody a favor. Finally, if you want to find out a bit more about what we do at Box of Crayons, there we go, our programs. We're really keen on giving practical coaching skills to time crunch managers so they can coach in 10 minutes or less. boxofcrayons.biz. And finally, a little reminder, LinkedIn group, Tools for the Time Crunch Manager. Join us there. It'll be well worth it. It's a really rich resource. I'm Michael Bungay, Stanier. I'm from Box of Crayons. Don't just ask good questions, but ask them well.